Right, thanks for coming. Today I hope will be a fun session. We're looking at differences. We're looking at personal differences, and we're using a book that's kind of interesting, quite fun, and was written by a husband and wife couple from Australia, and it's based on a lot of MRI type of research, brain scanning research during the 1990s. And what the purpose is, overall, is to help each of you to understand exactly who you are and how you fit on a distribution of personal characteristics which are located on the male-female dimension. It's based on a book called Why Men Don't Listen, sniggers from all the girls, and Women Can't Read Maps. Now, the point is not that all men do not listen, or that all women can't read maps. What it's about is trying to find out or to understand what it is that causes some really difficult questions of communication, and also about different types of ability. Some of the research is considered by some people to be very flawed, that you can't possibly have problems or structures of the brain which are different between male and female. I'm not actually terribly concerned about how accurate or inaccurate some of the research may or may not be, because what comes out of it are a set of questions that you can ask yourself, and towards the end I'll hand out a little questionnaire that you can actually complete and then score yourself to see how you fit in the distribution of all of these things, but predominantly communication, so that you can understand what you need to do, whether you're male or female, in terms of communicating effectively with the rest of the people in your group, at work, or at play, or at home even. And it's just really, really interesting, because ultimately, as you can see there, it's not the fact that there are men over there and women over there, because that's not how it is. It's we're all somewhere across the distribution. You'll find out where you live on the distribution from the questionnaire. But what it does do will be to help you to understand yourself well enough that you can make very sensible, very carefully considered choices about the type of career that you want to follow in the future. That's what it's all about. It's what a lot of what I've been trying to get over the last few weeks is about understanding yourself really, really well. So you can decide, yeah, I don't like this part of computer science, if you're enrolled on computer science, but I do like networks, or I do like informatics, I do like forensics, because they've got things that I really associate with, and vice versa. So what I want to think about is these. We are different, but in what way are we different? And then, as I said, consequences. Answers to me are of little interest in terms of teaching. If I teach you an answer, you stop learning. If I teach you a question that you can use time and time again, then you can make the right choices and understand the reason why you're making those choices in any given context. You can get this book from Amazon for about £2.50, I think. It's a brilliant read. Every chapter has a most amazing cartoon. Some of the cartoons you will have seen before and have sniggered at or laughed at. Some of them will provoke thought, and they're intended to do that. I shall show you a few of them as we go through. part of what they're doing is saying, yes, when we teach some of these different profiles, different management styles, different personality styles, we always teach them as though there's either that end or that end, because it's easy to research the poles. But what we have to remember in all of these things where they say it's let A or B, actually the world is not like that. If you start looking into the world of business cultures, business management styles, it's always shown as X or Y. McGregor's theory, XY theory, is always shown as either the far end of the X or the Y, the carrot or the stick. I respond only to rewards, or I only respond to punishment. The world is not like that. We respond in different circumstances, in different ways to the carrot and stick type of management style, perhaps. And so this is what I'm trying to get over today, is the distribution, the normal distribution of ability of responses, and we sit somewhere in the middle. And knowing where we fit, knowing where our organisation fits in this distribution of whatever it is we're looking at, is really, really valuable. Every time, ask the question each time. Never make assumptions. Just to reinforce that point, you're all presumably rather familiar with one of these little gadgets, an iPod Nano. This is an 8 gig version, has a couple of thousand tracks on it. Now, you're also familiar, no doubt, with these little music machines, that they often characterize or categorize tracks by genre, don't they? You know what I mean by genre? Right. You see me here. You've seen me now for, this is the 9th week we've been together. You see me here as I am. And you're making, almost inevitably, assumptions about me. Because that's how we work. We make assumptions when we see somebody about who and what they are and their background. So, the challenge today is, what are your assumptions about me? On here, I've categorized my favorites, the 4-star, 5-star tracks, as the ones that I'm most interested in, I most like. Out of the 270 odd tracks, which are my favorites, something over a quarter are from a single genre. Now, you see me here, you've seen me for 9 weeks. I've worked with you, many of you, in the workshops for the 6 or 7 weeks. Which genre do you think fits that most popular genre?
I think I might be walking straight into a trap here, but I'm saying jazz.
Jazz. That's a jazz. Anybody else?
Classic rock.
Classic rock.
I was going to say
Rock.
rock.
Pop. Country. Yeah, maybe. Pardon? House music. Right.
Vaporwave.
Sorry?
Vaporwave.
Right, I've never heard that one, but yeah. Pirate metal. Yeah, well, you know, that goes back to the well, maybe not quite to the 60s and 70s, when I sort of kind of grew up or developed my original views of music. Some of those ideas are actually not too bad, you know, sort of classic rock and so on, or country, because that comes from the 60s and 70s. You're all wrong. You've made unwarranted assumptions about who I am and my background. What would you say if I told you that that sort of 25 to 50% of my favourites are Southern African music, Lucky Dube, and others like that? You wouldn't have guessed that, would you? The lesson is, do not make assumptions about anything. You will almost inevitably get it wrong. And one of the traps that many consultants fall into is they've done it before, they've done it all before, and they move into a new company and they make assumptions about how that company does its business, about the culture within the business, and they never test it out. They work from assumptions and get it wrong. When we see people, we make assumptions. Now, another assumption, why do you think I wear this waistcoat? Is it because I like, I don't know, country activities, fishing and hunting and so on? Because people who do that wear waistcoats like this with lots of pockets. What is your assumption about me from wearing this?
It's cold outside and you needed something to keep you warm.
Yeah, but I wear this in the middle of summer.
You like waistcoats?
I like waistcoats. So either for wearing to keep warm or because I like waistcoats. Any other thoughts why I might?
You like it with pockets.
And why do I like it with pockets? Exactly. The only reason I wear this is because it's got pockets. Lots of pockets to hold things in. My iPhone I mean, where I put it. Put it in the wrong place. Wrong pocket, dear me. And so on. Again, illustrating assumptions. So, the point about assumptions about male-female and differences is they are almost always going to be wrong. We need to think about that spectrum. We need to think about consequences on our careers. We need to think about consequences on how we choose how to talk, how to listen, how to change how we listen. And Barbara and Alan Pease take us through about 6 or 8 different areas which have interesting implications for males and females. So the first one is spatial awareness. And they have lots of little tests like this all the way through. If we take that one number on the left, that's an opened out cube with its 6 sides. Which of A, B, C or D, when opened up, will match the one that has been opened up? How quickly can you do that? Who said A? A? Anybody say anything other than A? E. D? Will it? Where should the arrowhead point? Yeah, so it's A, isn't it? Is the correct one. Here's a slightly more complicated version of it. Yeah, the correct answer actually is C. Now, the next one actually is used as a test for potential air traffic controllers who obviously need to build in their heads a very, very complex map in 3 dimensions of where all of the aircraft are that they are busy controlling. Because you've only got a 2D map or picture on your radar screen that you're using. So at the top is a complex pattern, and it will make a box. and then follow the instructions. You've got up to 3 minutes to do that. And you've basically got to identify in each row which of the A, B, C or D actually will be made by folding that and then gluing that box together. And you've got to learn to rotate the picture in your head and have a good 3D representation. Don't shout out, I'll ask you when we get there in a little while. And if you can't do it, then you won't be an air traffic controller, which probably you weren't wanting to be anyway. Who's got an answer for row 1? A, hands up for A. Hands up for B. Hands up for C. Hands up for D. Okay. I'll give you the answer in a little bit. Row 2. A. B. C. D. Have you got to row 3 yet? Okay. Hands up for A, row 3, B, C, D. And row 4. A, B, C, D, none. The answers are row 1 is B, row 2 is D, row 3 is C, and row 4, none of those will actually represent the box. Now, as we had those hands up, don't worry about who had their hands up. For rows A, B, and C, you could see that distribution forming around the wrong answers and the right answer. The majority of you got it right, but some of you got it wrong and chose one of the 3 alternatives, and then row 4 it kind of fell apart slightly. On a different topic, if we look at this distribution, which was sort of around about the turn of the century, 2000 or thereabouts, we can see an interesting distribution that for some subjects it's almost the same, plus or minus 1% male-female split. But there are 1 or 2 subjects where there are quite largish differences. And it's interesting to think about what might be going on. They're not big differences, admittedly, but they are actually slightly significant. Not so much difference on the first lot, but these ones, hey, these are getting interesting. 82% to 18% for physics. 69-31 information technology. 65-35 for general science. 62-38 for chemistry. The observation that Barbara and the Pease couple make here is that these subjects particularly require a degree of spatial ability. And the tests of those rotating shapes is something that, as a general rule, more men are good at the spatial ability rotation than women as a general rule. It's not to say that women can't do it, because clearly quite a few of you ladies were able to do the spatial things. But in general terms, across the overall population, there is a gap. If you look again at another range of employment, different career opportunities, you can see those where there are very, very high spatial perception demands, there is a tendency to have very, very male-dominated employment. It's not, and it's interesting, and I'll show you in a minute, about the racing driver one. There's a very, very interesting issue here. And here it is. In Formula One racing and in NASCAR racing, by and large, it's very, very, very male-dominated. These are the 2, 4, 5 women who have ever driven in Formula One racing, have ever been in the teams. And very few ever actually were able to start. These are in the days when they had more people on the grid that are in the teams racing than actually had spaces on the grids. This is racing around a twisty, curving type of track, where you're overtaking a lot of the time. However, if you look into the field of dragster racing, where it is point the car and drive it straight, some of the very, very top drivers in the States, in the big top field dragsters, are women. And the part of the suggestion is that this does not require anything like the same level of 3D situational awareness and everything else. And there are some stunningly good top field dragster racing women out there in the States, but not in top Formula One racing. There are quite a lot at a lower level in the touring car type of stuff, but not at that level. Interesting question why that might be. One of the typical types of cartoons. Help, we're lost, but our dad won't stop to ask for directions. How many of you guys out there, up here, can associate with, I know where I'm going, I'm not going to stop to find how to get there because I'm sort of slightly lost, but I don't want to admit it. I can see a few heads nodding there. How many of you ladies have found this so irritating that your bloke will not stop for directions, even when it's blatantly obvious that we blokes have got it wrong and we've got lost? We blokes, girls, know that we're great at navigation, aren't we? Guys? Yeah. What we are apparently, on average, are capable of doing is look at a map and effectively create a 3D map in our head. And we don't have to turn the map around like that. Now, we sort of know that north is at the top, and even if we're driving southwards, we kind of rotate things around. And it's very interesting, if we do stop to ask directions, what it appears we're doing is turning that set of words into some form of 3D map. We build the map in terms of distance and direction, waypoints, like if you're going around the south part of Derby or on the ring road, you come to this, what's called the Spider roundabout, or Spider Bridge roundabout. And we wait for that, and then, I know where I am. But interesting. A different little cartoon of how, on average, some women are not terribly good at maths and kind of interpret them in a different way, a very, very different way. And it was interesting to find this particular picture about a form of map which actually women students up at, where was that? Durham, I think it was, were able to really cope very, very well. A different form of picture of the map. Something that, on average, men don't find quite as useful often. Because we're used to the 2D and we can work with it very, very well. Mostly. Not to say that all men can. Not to say that all women work best with that. The point is, there are differences. I'm not going to categorize any single one of you as great at map reading or not great at map reading. That's for you to decide, and for you to decide why. The overall picture comes out later on. Another thing that's been of interesting debate over the years has been about where we think. Do we all think in the same places in the brain or not? Some of you might have seen those two rather amusing stereotypes of the male way of thinking and how much effort or how much brain is allocated to, say, domestic skills, that little tiny pinprick. We're not very good often, some of us. We tend to have quite a good TV remote control addiction centre quite often. Read the whole thing, guys. These are meant particularly to sort of point at the men and where we get it all wrong. And of course a few getting at the ladies on the left-hand side. Again, I remind you, this is the stereotype that's there to cause mirth. But there is a slightly, well, there is an important point. Each of those items is kind of related to some of those stereotypes about how blokes do things and how women do things. And if we believe these as men, and we believe that that one on the left-hand side, the female one, then we get it wrong. And ladies, if you think that that's on the right-hand side is how we actually think about things and the amount of effort we put into thinking about things, you'll get it wrong as well. However, what becomes interesting is when we start thinking about the real world of the real brains and where it is thought we do some of our thinking. It's been categorized on the right hemisphere, you do all of that artistic, creative, visual stuff, and on the left-hand side, maths and so on and so forth. This is the common knowledge that's been around in psychology, experimental psychology, for 30, 40, 50 years and longer. Part of it is supported by different types of research. But questions. Why do we believe that that previous diagram was factual and actually represents where each of us does our creative thinking and our mathematical or otherwise thinking? And more importantly, are there any consequences if we believe that previous diagram was actually correct? What's the evidence for that being correct? And what are the consequences? So let us have a little look at questioning common knowledge and looking at some of the measured evidence from MRI scanning. Spatial ability. These are done by putting people into MRI scanners and then getting them to do certain types of tasks and then measuring what's going on in the brain, and the dark points in the brain, the dark patches, are where there's a lot of activity going on. And we can see a very, very different level of activity in a typical male and a typical female brain. So spatial ability is not located in a single side of the brain. It's spread across both hemispheres, both in male and in female. But there's a lot more activity in the male than in the female, on average. Speech. Now this is why we are so lousy at communicating, lads. Because the women spend far more effort in their brains actually in communication. Far more of their mental capacity is there handling communication, compared with our relatively low levels. And again, you can see that the women have got it. The female brain typically has it spread far more heavily on both sides. The males a little bit more in the right-hand side, and less on the left-hand side if I've got the sides right there. We are different, guys and gals. Another one. Where's the emotion? 2 splodges on the right hemisphere for blokes, but it's spread across the whole brain, both hemispheres. It's not located in one side. It's integrated, that one, on the right-hand side, across everything. That first picture is obviously completely wrong. How do we see what we see? What do you see in that picture, folks? How many have seen this picture before? Do you remember what the answer is? Yes. Those of you who have not seen it, what does that picture show? Hands up for a beautiful young girl. Hands up for an ugly old hag. Can you flip between those 2 pictures, folks? Or are you locked in on a single picture? Can you switch it? So, hands up those who saw the pretty young lady. Hands up who saw the old hag. Okay. There is the mouth of the old hag. Does that help you switch?
Yes.
And there is the old hag's nose, but high up is the girl's nose, just a little tiny little button of a nose. On average, folks, on average, men tend to see the young, beautiful girl. On average, the women tend, although this group doesn't quite subscribe to that distribution, the women tend to see the old hag. Don't know why. One of the things that happens. Now, this one, what do you see? Now, if I tell you that the length of the front and back edge of that picture, those 2 lengths are identical on the picture. How many believe me when I say that? How many want proof? The interesting question then is, why, for those of you who want proof, do you feel you need the proof of a tape measure against the edges? Pardon? Yeah, because some of us are seeing that as a 3D image, and we know that in 3D, like that, a perspective drawing, the lines further back, although they might be the same, in the real world, they will look smaller because they are further away. So those who want proof are seeing that as a full 3D picture and thinking, hang on, there's something odd, the back of the table has to be longer. We are beginning again to make some interesting assumptions about the image. What is the word that is there in that splodge? Who says fly? Yeah. How many of you can't see the word fly in there? You need to look at the white section, not the black section. We normally would look at the black, because that's how we learn to read. The black on the white. But to read that, you need to read the white on the black. On average, again, the P's say women will find the word fly much more quickly than us blokes. There are quite a lot of advantages at times to being a woman, you know. Now we move on to communication across male to female and back again. Bo, you feel that one? Yeah, quite. How many of you blokes can sort of say, yeah, I can see the point of that one, yeah, quite. Now remember, this is, at a serious level, this is not a critique of male versus female. This is about understanding each other. But the consequences of that being even partly right, as a caricature, are really quite interesting in how we blokes try and listen to women, and how women listen to men. How men talk to women, how women talk to men. This is hilariously funny at one level, but it's also an incredibly serious issue about communication. Now, the consequences of this one, which again, I mean, I can hear all of you laughing your socks off. Well, nearly. I don't mind which side of those two you're on. If, from your perspective, whether you're male or female, you expect to see the top row, if you're female, and you see the bottom row in blokes, you think, blimey, what's going on? They're not reacting at all. Or blokes think, what on earth's going on? Why so much reaction? It's really kind of bizarre, very difficult to cope with. If you are sensitized to the stereotypical different ways of responding, you will begin to be able to more accurately read how your message is being received. And if you are expecting lots of response like the top row, and you only see this kind of deadpan approach from somebody, you see, it could easily be a female providing that sort of response who is more towards the male side of the spectrum. That really is going to cause a lot of confusion, woman talking to woman. think about those consequences if we get it wrong, if we don't understand how people actually react, not as the average stereotypical woman or the average stereotypical man, because those stereotypes do not exist. Neither of those is actually accurate all the time about any given person. The message is you need to look very carefully at the person you are talking with to work out, are they more that way or that way? How do I understand how they're reacting? It's about treating individuals, not as assumed stereotypes. And it goes all the way across everything we're going to be looking at. I'm obviously not really quite like the stereotypical male over there, impassive and so on. I tend to use a lot of arm movement, I talk with my arms, a lot of intonation. Maybe I'm not the stereotypical male. I don't know. Thinking about going back again to that original picture about the hemispheres and so on. I want to hand out a little test for you. It's on two sides, so if you can pass them down. I hope I've got enough copies, I should do. And what I want you to do is to fill in the questionnaire, make the best possible guess that you can. Okay folks, now fill that in very quickly and then score it, and note that there are two different scoring systems, one for males, one for females. And out of it you will get a number at the end. When you've done that and done the scoring, you'll find on the next slide the scale that you can then map yourself against. Now, the very interesting thing is that if you score in the middle area from, say, 130 to 210, or that middle area, then you have an amazing gift. Because you are capable of easily and naturally understanding people across the whole spectrum. If you are one of the blokes who live down the bottom end here, you will never really understand people even at the middle, let alone at the top end, and vice versa. But if you have one somewhere in the middle, and most people fit actually into the middle areas, then you will find you have a most extraordinary and most wonderful gift to be able to communicate both ways. In a very different context, you guys need to be able to develop the skills, or most of you, to be able to talk to technical people and to business people in terms of computer forensics or networks and so on, because you're always dealing with non-technical customers. And you're also going to be the technical experts as well. So you need to be able to develop that middle capability both ways. There are a couple of other slides with some really entertaining questions that I haven't got time to cover, but they are fun to think about and explore in your own minds. The important point about the question before this is that men are generally direct in what they say. Sometimes women aren't quite so direct. Again, men, we have to understand that very carefully, otherwise we will misunderstand the communication. So I'll just put that back up again. That's the scale. Because we need to finish now, there's a class waiting to get in, and we need to be leaving very shortly, folks. So thanks very much. I hope you found that entertaining, but I hope you found it useful.